Most people will never have to fight for their lives. But for the people in these stories, holding on wasn't optional. It was the only thing standing between them and the end. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 rescues so unbelievable, they sound made up. 25. Philip Walton, Nigeria. In October 2020, armed gunmen grabbed a 27-year-old American from his farm in Niger and hauled him across the border into Nigeria. They wanted $1 million in ransom. What they got instead was SEAL Team 6. 30 operators parachuted into the Nigerian countryside in the middle of the night after flying 11 hours straight from Spain. I'm talking over 2,000 miles, multiple mid-air refuelings, and a small fleet of aircraft just to get them there. I'm talking about transports, gunships, tankers, the works, all for one guy. Once on the ground, the SEALs hiked 3 miles through the dark to the hideout. The firefight was short. 6 captors went down. Philip Walton walked out without a scratch, and not a single operator was injured. From kidnapping to rescue, 96 hours. 24. Elephant CPR in Thailand. A baby elephant crossing a road in Thailand was struck by a motorbike in 2020 and collapsed unconscious on the pavement. The situation looked dire. Then, Reprieve arrived, an emergency responder with nearly 3 decades of experience who happened to be off-duty and passing through. Mana had attempted CPR on humans many times throughout his career, but never successfully, and certainly never on an elephant. But he didn't hesitate. He dropped beside the calf, estimated where an elephant's heart might be based on human anatomy and a video he'd once seen online, and started chest compressions. 10 minutes passed. Then the calf stirred, it blinked, and stood up. Mana later said he nearly cried when the animal started moving. After all those years trying to save people, his first successful resuscitation was a baby elephant on a dark Thai highway. The calf made a full recovery and was reunited with its mother that same night. Proof that the right person in the right place can change everything, even across species. 23. USS Rhode Island saves stranded fishermen. Ever wonder what happens when a nuclear submarine finds you dying in the ocean? 5 fishermen, including a 14-year-old boy, were found in 2009. Their boat had capsized 4 days earlier. No food, no water, no rescue in sight. Then, the USS Rhode Island, a sub loaded with ballistic missiles, spotted them during a routine patrol and decided to surface. That's not a small decision. These subs don't come up for anything. But the crew pulled the fishermen onto the hull, wrapped them in blankets, gave them water, and waited with them until another ship showed up. 5 guys got saved by a vessel carrying enough firepower to start World War III. A weird day for everyone involved. 22. Sleeping Bear Dunes extraction operations. Sleeping Bear Dunes in Michigan looks like a postcard. Massive sand formations tower 450 feet above Lake Michigan, and the views from the summit are genuinely breathtaking. The problem? Well, what goes down doesn't always come back up. The dunes are deceptively steep, and the sand shifts constantly underfoot. Visitors scramble down thinking they'll casually hike back up, then realize halfway that their legs are burning. The ground keeps sliding, and the shoreline they started from now seems impossibly far away. Park rangers conduct extractions here all the time. Some require helicopters. Fees can exceed $3,000 depending on the complexity, and every summer, despite clear warnings and posted signs, tourists keep underestimating what these dunes can do. It's a gorgeous trap, inviting from above, humbling from below. The rangers keep pulling people out. The dunes keep teaching the same lesson. Nature doesn't care how confident you feel at the top. 21. Thai cave mission and the ketamine decision. In 2018, 12 boys from a Thai youth soccer team and their coach got trapped deep inside the Tham Luang cave system after flash flooding cut off their exit. They spent over 2 weeks in darkness before divers finally reached them. But getting them out presented an even bigger problem. The escape route wound through narrow, flooded passages, some barely wide enough for a single person. Visibility was nearly zero. Even experienced cave divers found the conditions harrowing. Expecting children with minimal swimming ability to navigate that without panicking seemed impossible. So the team made an unprecedented call: sedate them. Anesthesiologists administered ketamine to each boy, rendering them unconscious. Divers then slapped the children to stretchers and guided them through these submerged tunnels one by one. They couldn't see. They couldn't struggle. They couldn't panic. Over 6 days, all 13 came out alive. Medical professionals still debate whether the decision was brilliant or reckless, but everyone agrees on the outcome. It worked. 20. Endurance on the Greenland Ice Cap. In November 1942, a military plane made a forced landing on the Greenland Ice Cap. That alone would be a crisis. What happened next turned it into a catastrophe, with 6 aircraft sent to retrieve the crew, either crashing or getting stranded themselves. Instead of 1 downed plane, there were now 7, and dozens of men trapped on a frozen wasteland with almost nothing to keep them going. They waited 5.5 months for extraction. 5.5 months on a glacier, enduring temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in minutes, blizzards that buried their makeshift shelters, and the constant threat of crevices opening beneath them. They rationed every scrap of food. They burned whatever fuel they could find. They refused to give up. When recovery crews finally reached them, those who emerged were gaunt, frostbitten, and exhausted, but breathing. The Greenland Ice Cap incident remains one of World War II's most harrowing endurance stories. 19. The found baby and the father who didn't know. In 2010, a Canadian man heard crying coming from a dumpster. He looked inside, found a newborn abandoned and alone, and immediately pulled the infant to safety. After paramedics rushed the newborn to the hospital, everyone assumed the story was over. Then, the DNA results came in. The man who had found the baby? He was the biological father. Yet, it was true that he had no idea the child existed until he heard crying from that dumpster. Turns out the mother had concealed the pregnancy and abandoned the newborn without telling him. He fought for custody and ended up raising a kid he didn't even know was his. It's one of the most bizarre twists a story like this has ever taken. 18. Saskatchewan power line gambit. Getting stranded in the Saskatchewan wilderness is bad enough by itself. But getting stranded there in winter with no supplies and no way to signal for help is way worse. One man in 2010 found himself in exactly that situation and came up with a solution that was either genius or insane, possibly both. What did he do? He cut down power lines. The logic made a certain desperate sense, as severing electrical infrastructure would trigger alarms, send repair crews to investigate, and lead them directly to his location. And it worked out pretty well. The power company noticed the outage, dispatched teams to find the damage, and discovered a stranded man instead of a fallen tree. The retrieval itself was successful, though the aftermath was complicated. Deliberately destroying power infrastructure creates serious safety hazards and isn't exactly legal. But when you're freezing in the middle of nowhere with no other options, the math of staying alive gets creative. He made it out, which is ultimately the only metric that matters when the alternative is becoming a frozen statistic. 17. Istanbul villa deception. In 2009, 9 women in Istanbul answered what they thought was a casting call for a Big Brother-style reality show. Yet, instead of cameras and confessionals, they found themselves imprisoned in a villa by a criminal organization that had no intention of making TV. The women were trapped for 2 months. The captors kept up the act, telling them filming was about to begin, while secretly recording them and selling the footage online. They thought they were waiting for their big break, but they were actually being sold. Police eventually raided the villa and got all 9 women out. Turns out, the whole operation had been running for weeks before anyone caught on. A casting call, a nice villa, promises of fame. That's all it took. 16. French soldiers' last-minute reprieve. Albert Roche was about to be shot by his own army. His crime? Falling asleep at his post. In World War I, that was enough to get you dragged in front of a firing squad, and Roche was next in line. The soldiers assembled, the moment approached, and then a messenger showed up with news that changed everything. Roche hadn't been slacking. He had spent the previous 10 hours crawling under enemy fire to retrieve his wounded captain, dragging the injured officer back to safety through conditions that would break most men. By the time he returned, his body simply gave out. He collapsed from exhaustion at the exact moment someone found him asleep. Once word spread about what he'd actually done, they called off the firing squad. Grosch went on to become one of France's most decorated soldiers of the war. He came within minutes of being shot for the very act that should have earned him a medal. War doesn't always reward heroism on schedule. 15. Canadian snowboarders burn their homework. The Greenland group burned fuel to stay warm on a glacier. These two teens burned something a little more satisfying. In 2020, two 16-year-olds got lost while snowboarding in the British Columbia backcountry. Temperatures dropped, darkness fell. They had no shelter, no fire-starting equipment, and no clear path back to safety. What they did have were their school backpacks. So, they burned their homework. Page by page, they fed their schoolwork into a small fire that kept them warm through the freezing night. By morning, search teams located them and brought them out with only minor injuries. The homework was trashed, but the students were alive. Somewhere, a teacher had to accept I was stranded in the wilderness as a legitimate excuse for missing assignments. 14. Harrison Ford locates Boy Scout near Yellowstone. In 2001, a 13-year-old Boy Scout named Cody Clausen wandered away from his group near Yellowstone National Park and found himself completely lost in the Wyoming wilderness. He survived out there for over 18 hours with no phone, no radio, and no way to call for help. The only thing he had going for him was a belt buckle, which he angled toward the sky to catch sunlight and create a reflection that passing aircraft might notice. It was a desperate move, the kind of survival tactic that sounds good in theory, but almost never works in practice. Except this time, it did. And the pilot who spotted the glint was Harrison Ford. The actor had been a licensed pilot for decades and frequently flies in that part of the country. He saw the flash, radioed the coordinates to search teams, and helped guide rescuers straight to the kid. Cody walked away without a scratch. Most people would consider surviving alone in the wilderness a wild story on its own, but getting rescued because Indiana Jones or Han Solo happen to be flying over takes it to a whole new level. 13. Australian teens trapped by crocodile. In 2003, 3 Australian teens were crossing floodwaters in the Northern Territory when a crocodile attacked. One of them didn't make it, while the other 2 managed to climb a tree, and then couldn't come down. As a result, the crocodile stayed for 22 hours. Throughout the night and into the next morning, the teens remained perched in the branches while the predators circled below, waiting. They couldn't descend without risking another attack. They couldn't signal effectively from their position either, so all they could do at this point was hold on and hope someone would find them before exhaustion or the crocodile won. A helicopter finally located and extracted them the following day. The retrieval came after nearly a full day of terror, trapped between rising floodwaters and a patient predator that showed no signs of leaving. 12. Dolphins keep boy buoyant for 12 hours. A boy from Northern Ireland, later nicknamed the Frostbite Boy, held on for 12 hours straight in the open ocean in 2021. He was hypothermic, exhausted, and alone, except for the pod of dolphins that surrounded him. According to the boy's account, the dolphins stayed with him throughout the ordeal. They circled, nudged him when he started to sink, and may have helped keep him at the surface during the longest hours. Recovery crews eventually located him and pulled him from the sea, badly hypothermic but alive. Scientists remain divided on whether dolphins intentionally assist distressed humans or if their behavior just happens to look like aid. When you're floating alone in cold currents and a pod of dolphins decides to stick around, you don't ask questions. You just hold on. 11. Titanic figure refuses amputation, wins Wimbledon. Richard Norris Williams endured the Titanic disaster in 1912 by spending hours in freezing Atlantic waves waiting for help. When he finally reached safety, doctors examined his severely frostbitten legs and recommended amputation of both. Williams refused. He committed to an aggressive rehabilitation program determined to regain full use of his legs against medical advice. The recovery was grueling. The odds were against him. And 8 years later, Richard Norris Williams won the Wimbledon doubles championship. The man doctors said would never walk again became a world-class tennis champion. He later served in World War I, picked up some military honors, and lived until 1968. Most people would have let the Titanic be the defining moment of their lives. Williams barely treated it as a setback. 10. Greek man drifts 16 miles with a football. In 2022, A 30-year-old man was swept out to sea near Chalkidiki, Greece. His friend, who had been in the waves with him, was never found. But this man refused to become a second casualty. For 20 hours, he floated in the open ocean, battling exhaustion, currents, and the psychological weight of watching his friend disappear. The only thing keeping him buoyant was a small football he managed to grab. Recovery crews eventually found him 16 miles from where he started, still clutching the ball. Though the currents had carried him further than most people drive to work, he had stayed alive the entire journey. His friend's body, however, was never recovered, which means this story is both a miracle and a tragedy. 9. Tongan boys build a functioning society on deserted island. In 1965, 6 Tongan boys stole a small fishing boat, got caught in a storm, and ended up shipwrecking on a deserted island in the South Pacific, where they would remain stranded for 15 months. And unlike the chaos depicted in Lord of the Flies, these kids built something remarkable. There, they established a functioning mini-society, cultivated a garden for food, maintained a permanent fire, constructed a makeshift gym, and even built a badminton court. For over a year, 6 teenagers managed resources, resolved disputes, and kept each other alive through cooperation rather than competition. When a passing boat finally spotted them, the captain found not chaos and desperation, but organized young men thriving against the odds. It's the real-life counter-narrative to every story that assumes children left alone will descend into disaster. 8. Baby Jessica rescued from a Texas well. On October 14, 1987, 18-month-old Jessica McClure was playing in her aunt's backyard in Midland, Texas, when she slipped into an abandoned water well. The opening was only 8 inches wide, and she dropped 22 feet into a space so narrow that her leg was pinned above her head. She couldn't move, and nobody could reach her. What followed was 58 hours of around-the-clock rescue efforts that captivated the entire country. Workers tried drilling a parallel shaft through solid rock, but their equipment kept failing because it was designed for downward drilling, not horizontal. They brought in oil drillers and eventually used water jet cutting technology to break through. The whole time, rescuers could hear little Jessica crying, humming, and singing Winnie the Pooh through a microphone they lowered into the well. When paramedic Robert O'Donnell finally emerged from the shaft carrying a bandaged, dirt-covered but alert toddler, all 3 major networks broadcast it live. President Reagan called her family, and Vice President Bush visited her in the hospital. Jessica lost a toe to gangrene from the circulation damage, but she survived. She's now in her late 30s, married with 2 kids, and says she has no memory of any of it. 7. Sea lion keeps Golden Gate Bridge jumper above surface. Earlier, we met dolphins that may have kept a boy buoyant for 12 hours. Kevin Hines had a similar, unlikely guardian, except his showed up after a 220-foot fall. In 2000, Kevin stepped off the Golden Gate Bridge railing. The moment he let go, he immediately regretted it. He hit the water at about 75 miles an hour, shattering vertebrae on impact. Fewer than 40 people have ever survived that fall. He broke through the surface, badly injured and struggling to stay afloat. Then, something incredible happened. A sea lion appeared. Kevin later described the animal circling beneath him, nudging him upward whenever he started to sink. It stayed until the Coast Guard arrived. Marine biologists have debated whether the animal was intentionally helping or simply curious. Kevin doesn't care about the scientific explanation. He's alive, and he's spent the years since becoming one of the country's most prominent mental health advocates, sharing his story to help others step back from the edge. 6. Family endures 37 days at sea using turtles. In 1971, the Robertson family set sail across the Pacific on their schooner Lucette. Partway through the voyage, a pod of killer whales attacked and sank the boat, leaving 5 people stranded on a small life raft with almost nothing. Dehydration became the primary threat, as drinking seawater would only accelerate their end, and rainwater was scarce. Then, someone remembered an old naval trick, which involves turtle blood enemas. Yep, you heard me right. Drinking turtle blood destroys your kidneys, but absorbing it the other way, your body gets the hydration without the toxic effects. So, the Robertsons caught sea turtles, drained the blood, mixed it with whatever rainwater they could scrape from the raft, and did what they had to do to stay alive. After 37 days adrift, fishermen spotted their raft 300 miles from land and pulled all 5 Robertsons to safety. Not exactly a story you'd share at dinner parties, but it worked. 5. Guitarist takes command of sinking cruise ship. In 1991, the cruise ship Oceanos began sinking off the coast of South Africa during a severe storm. The crew, in a staggering act of cowardice, abandoned ship, leaving everyone aboard without warning or assistance. Enter Moss Hills, a guitarist hired to perform on the cruise. When Hills realized what was happening, he took charge. He made his way to the bridge, figured out how to operate the radio equipment, and started broadcasting distress calls. He coordinated with helicopters, organized everyone into evacuation groups, and essentially ran the entire operation himself. Everyone on board survived. Over 500 travelers made it off that ship because a musician with no maritime training decided someone had to do something. And that someone might as well be him. Moss Hills didn't sign up to be a hero. He signed up to play guitar. But when the crew fled and panic spread, he became exactly what the situation required. 4. Sole plane crash survivor floats 9 hours in the Indian Ocean. In 2009, Yemenia Flight 626 crashed into the Indian Ocean near the Comoros Islands. All 152 people on board perished, except one. Bahia Bakari was 12 years old. She couldn't really swim and she had no life jacket. When the plane broke apart on impact, she was thrown into pitch-black waves in the middle of a storm, surrounded by wreckage and the sounds of other travelers crying out in the darkness. One by one, those sounds stopped. For more than 9 hours, Bahia clung to a piece of floating debris while swells battered her and bodies drifted past. She was injured, exhausted, and completely alone. When recovery crews finally spotted her tiny figure among the wreckage, they could barely believe what they were seeing. Bahia lost her mother in the crash. She spent weeks recovering from her injuries, but she held on through something that took everyone else, becoming known around the world as the Miracle Girl, a child who refused to let go when there was no logical reason to believe holding on would matter. 3. Israeli cargo ship retrieves Vietnamese refugees. In 1977, an Israeli cargo ship called the Uvali was crossing the South China Sea when the crew spotted something floating in the distance, a small wooden boat carrying 66 Vietnamese refugees, men, women, and children, all fleeing the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Their vessel was disintegrating. Their supplies were gone. Some had even collapsed from dehydration already. Many ships had passed without stopping. Taking on refugees meant complications. Paperwork, port refusals, and diplomatic headaches. The Uvali's captain made a different choice. The crew pulled all 66 refugees aboard, fed them, treated their dehydration, gave them clean clothes, and provided safe passage despite knowing that some ports would refuse to accept them. The captain insisted on finding somewhere that would take the people he brought aboard, and eventually succeeded. In an era where countless boats passed refugees without slowing down, one captain decided that human beings struggling in the sea mattered more than the inconvenience of saving them. 2. Mossad runs fake scuba resort to free Ethiopian Jews. This one sounds like a movie plot, but it actually happened. Between 1982 and 1984, the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad purchased an abandoned coastal village in Sudan and transformed it into a fully operational scuba diving resort, complete with paying tourists, diving instructors, and beach amenities. However, the resort was merely a cover. And their real mission? Bringing Ethiopian Jewish folks to safety as they fled famine, persecution, and civil war. Mossad's agents posed as European entrepreneurs running a legitimate dive operation. Tourists came, paid for rooms, went on underwater excursions, and had no idea that the friendly staff serving them drinks were Israeli operatives. Meanwhile, at night, those same operatives smuggled Ethiopian Jewish refugees from inland camps to the coast, then transported them by boat to Israeli naval vessels waiting offshore. For over 2 years, the operation helped bring approximately 8,000 people to new lives. Guests even left positive reviews. Refugees found safety in Israel, and the intelligence agency proved that sometimes the best disguise is hiding in plain sight. 1. A Toy Story moment. In 2008, Walter Marino and his 13-year-old son Christopher were fishing off the Florida coast when their boat capsized, stranding them miles from shore. No life jackets, no way to call for help, just a father and son treading water in the open Atlantic. Christopher, who has autism, loved Toy Story more than anything. Buzz Lightyear was his hero, and Walter knew that keeping his son calm was the only way they'd make it through this. So, he grabbed onto the one thing that always worked, Buzz's catchphrase. Together, they repeated "to infinity and beyond" for hours while fighting exhaustion and the current.
To infinity and beyond!
When the Coast Guard finally spotted them, Christopher was still saying it. Rescue crews later said they'd never seen anything like it. A boy staying calm through something that terrifying because his dad knew exactly what his son needed to hear. Walter told reporters the phrase kept Christopher focused when panic could have taken over. Sometimes the thing that saves you isn't a life jacket. It's knowing your kid. And that's 25 moments where giving up wasn't an option, and somehow, against all odds, it worked out. Whether it was holding on for hours, making impossible calls under pressure, or just being in the right place to make a difference, these are the kinds of stories that restore a little faith in what people can do for each other. If you want more, click here for 25 incredible rescue stories that will blow your mind. That's all for today. As always, hit that like button, subscribe with the notification bell, and I'll catch you in the next one. And let me know if you were ever a part of a rescue story, whether you rescued someone or rescued yourself. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. See you later.